The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the ordinary kind, the kind that lives between conversations or hangs politely at the end of a long day. No, this silence was different. It was thick, watching. It pressed itself against your skin like mist, soaking into your thoughts and asking you not to speak. I had arrived in the village of Valea Mortzi, Valley of the Dead, nestled deep within the Carpathian Mountains. The name wasn't on any modern map. You had to trace it through hand-drawn sketches passed down by elders or half-erased journals of explorers who never returned. I had followed both, not for thrill, but for truth. I was a folklorist, a seeker of forgotten stories, and this village held one that hadn't made it to any textbook. They say here, no one whistles, ever. No matter the mood, no matter the moment, whistling was treated as a blasphemy, a crime against something older than God. I first heard about it in a 1901 field report by an Austrian researcher named Karl Wieckner. His notes were erratic, smudged with ink, and in some places burned, but one phrase had been underlined 3 times. Do not whistle. The trees remember sound. I arrived on the last day of October. The sky was the color of cold ashes, and the bare branches tangled above the winding road like veins in an old man's hand. My driver, an old man with more mustache than face, stopped 2 miles before the village and refused to go further. You walk from here, he said in broken English. If you hear the engine, they'll think you bring noise, and noise is bad. He crossed himself twice and drove away without asking for payment. So I walked, boots crunching frost-bitten leaves, backpack heavy with audio gear and journals. My breath fogged in the air, but the forest didn't seem to breathe at all. No birds, no squirrels, not even the wind dared move. It felt like walking through a photograph. Still, perfect, wrong. The village was made of wood and stone. Cabins leaned like old friends, and each one had a symbol carved above the door. A triangle with an eye in the middle. Not the Illuminati kind, something older, watchful. I greeted the first person I saw, a woman in a red shawl carrying firewood. She looked at me, looked at the microphone sticking out of my bag, and without a word dropped the logs and hurried away. I heard the door slam behind her. My welcome committee. It wasn't until dusk that someone acknowledged me. An elderly man, skin like weathered bark, approached me as I sat sketching the church at the center of the village. It had no bell, no cross, just silence. You're the outsider. You came to listen, but here we survive by not listening. His name was Baba Ilya, the oldest living man in the village. His eyes were gray as ash and sharper than any knife. He carried no cane but leaned on stories to walk. I asked him about the whistling. His face didn't change, but he motioned for me to follow him into his home. Inside, the air smelled of pine and burnt herbs. Candles lit the corners, though no flame flickered. Every window was covered with black cloth. He served me bitter tea and began to speak, not with fear, but with respect, as one might speak of the sea or fire. Long ago, he said, there were no rules. People sang, danced, whistled into the wind. The forest listened and liked it. But one day, it whistled back, and we learned that it doesn't just listen. It mimics, it follows, it devours the sound and the soul that made it. He told me of a boy, young, foolish, joyous, who had gone to the woods with a flute carved from elderwood. He never returned. Only his flute came back, buried in the snow outside the church, still warm to the touch. Since then, no one whistled, not to themselves, not to call a dog, not even to mimic the wind. You see, sound is a thread, Ilie whispered, and whistling is the sharpest thread. It unravels the veil. He leaned closer, and when that veil falls, the forest walks. I left his house that night full of wonder and doubt. Stories were my trade, after all. I'd heard hundreds, ghost dogs in Yorkshire, singing caves in Sardinia, trees that bled salt in Poland. But this felt different. Not just a story passed down, a law. On my way back to the guest house, I passed a small girl drawing in the dirt with a stick. I crouched and smiled. "What are you making?" She stared at me and said, "A face, but I have to finish before dark. If not, it might finish itself." She pointed at the trees. "They don't like unfinished sounds or people." That night, I wrote in my journal by candlelight. I wanted to believe this was folklore, a village-wide superstition reinforced by tragedy and myth. But I couldn't ignore the quiet. It was the kind of silence that felt designed, not by nature, but by fear. And somewhere, deep in the woods, I thought I heard something faint, a whistle, far away, high-pitched, and it wasn't coming from any human mouth. I slept with the window shut and the curtains drawn, but still, I didn't sleep. The whistle had been faint, fainter than a breath, but it had cut through the silence like a crack in glass. I kept telling myself it was the wind, just the wind. But wind doesn't have rhythm. Wind doesn't repeat itself. And wind doesn't sound like it's calling back. The next morning, the sky was the same color as old bones. I stepped out of the guest house and found the village still coated in that same uneasy quiet. People moved like ghosts, heads low, footsteps soft, eyes down, as if sound itself was being rationed. I walked to the well in the center of the village, a stone circle covered with a thick wooden lid and rope bindings. There was a sign carved into it in the local tongue, but the only word I could translate was tacere, silence. That's when I met Sorina. She couldn't have been more than 30, though the lines around her eyes said she had seen more winters than her age should allow. She carried a basket of herbs and had the look of someone who knew how to keep secrets and had learned the cost of telling them. "You're the one asking questions," she said without turning. I nodded. "I'm here to document your traditions. I work with the European Folklore Society." She finally looked at me. Her eyes were pale green and cold like a forest lake in October. "Then you should know, some stories aren't meant to be told, not because they're dangerous to repeat, but because they're dangerous to remember." I told her I respected their beliefs. I only wanted to record the customs, the symbols, the rituals. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We don't write them down. That's why they're still alive." She walked away, her footsteps silent on the frozen earth. In the distance, I saw an old man hanging what looked like a wind chime made of bones in his window. Except it didn't move. It made no sound. Sound was not a gift here. It was a gamble. Later that day, I returned to Baba Ilia's home. He had agreed to let me study his family's grimoire, an old leather-bound tome filled with prayers, rituals, and symbols meant to seal the mouth of the forest. As I flipped through the yellowed pages, I saw drawings of mouths stitched shut with black thread, trees with hollow faces, and a passage that stopped me cold. "Nu fluirà in padore, padore te va fluirà in apoi, scicundo face tu numayesht tu. Do not whistle in the forest. The forest will whistle back. And when it does, you are no longer you. At sunset, I walked the perimeter of the village. There was a barrier made of upright wooden posts around the border. Each post had an animal skull affixed to the top, facing outward. I counted 7, one for each entrance to the forest. Sorina joined me again, as if summoned by my curiosity. "They're not just decorations," she said softly. "They're watchers, sentinels. When the wind changes direction, we turn the skulls. If we forget, bad things come through." I asked her why no one had ever left, why no one had tried to modernize. She shook her head. "People have tried, but the forest never forgets a voice." She pointed to the tree line. "There are paths in there that don't lead back. The moment you make a sound, the forest makes you part of it. Your breath, your voice, your name." I told her I had heard the whistle last night. She paled. "Then it heard you too." Back in my room, I reviewed my recordings. Nothing. No whistle, no rustling, not even the sound of me turning in my bed. Just a perfect, unnatural silence. Until the very end of the clip. A single second of static. Then a high-pitched note, sharp, deliberate, lonely. I rewound it, played it again, and I swear, it was my whistle. But I hadn't whistled. I hadn't whistled. In my journal that night, I wrote, "They say legends are born from fear. But what if fear is born from memory? What if this place doesn't preserve a story? What if it preserves a presence?" I was no longer certain I was documenting folklore. I was beginning to believe I was documenting a warning. And someone, or something, was listening. From the trees, from the shadows, from beneath the silence. The next day, I awoke with the peculiar sensation that someone had been in my room. Not that anything was missing. Nothing moved, nothing broken, but something was off. The window, though I was sure I'd locked it, was unlatched. The candle beside my bed, which I had blown out, was nothing but a puddle of warm wax. And on the desk where my field journal sat was a single pine needle, fresh, green, damp. There are no pine trees near the guest house. I stepped outside, expecting to see villagers starting their daily chores, but again, the streets were empty. Not just quiet, deserted. Windows were shut, doors bolted. Even the animals, chickens, goats, dogs, were gone, hidden away. Only the trees stood in their usual place, still, tall, listening. It was then I realized it was too quiet. Even in silence, there is usually some trace of life, a creak, a gust, a step. But here, nothing, not a single sound existed outside my own breathing. And that's when I heard it, a whisper. So faint, it might have been imagined, but unmistakably real. Nui kema, osa te auda. Don't call them. They'll hear you. I spun around. No one. But the voice had been a child's, female, close, maybe 5 or 10 feet away. I walked slowly, following the sound, or the memory of the sound. As I reached the edge of the woods, the fog shifted, and sitting beneath a crooked ash tree was a little girl with a crow feather braided into her hair. She looked at me with eyes far too old for her face. She said, "They talk at night. Not with words, with roots." I knelt cautiously. "Who talks?" She pointed to the forest. "The ones who were taken. They don't die. They become part of the trees." I felt a chill run up my spine. She continued, as if reciting a story she had memorized. There was a boy once, long ago. He laughed too much, laughed and whistled. He said he didn't believe. So the forest taught him how to listen. What happened to him? I asked. She stood up and whispered. He came back once, but he didn't have a face. Later that evening, I asked Baba Elia about the story. His expression darkened like a storm cloud rolling over the mountain. She speaks of the last whistler, the boy who made us remember fear. He poured 2 glasses of tsuika, plum brandy, that tasted like fire and regret. He then told me the tale, the legend of the last whistler. His name was André, son of a carpenter, 16 years old, handsome, loud, and full of pride. He believed the stories were just that, stories. So one winter, when the air was still and the snow had silenced the earth, he walked into the woods and whistled a tune. Once, twice, 3 times. They say the forest went still. Not even the snow dared fall. And then the wind answered him. It whistled back, not a mirror of his tune, but a mimicry, close but wrong. The notes were bent, twisted, like something that had heard music once, but had forgotten how it worked. André laughed. He didn't come back. 3 days later, the villagers found his boots beside the well. Inside the boots were his feet, still warm, as if he had simply stepped out of them and vanished into the air. No blood, no tracks, only a faint sound in the distance, the sound of himself whistling. Only the pitch was off. It was hollow, like the sound came from inside a throat that had forgotten how to be human. From that day, the village took an oath. No one would whistle again, because once the forest learns your tune, it never forgets, and sometimes it sings it back to call you home. Baba Elia leaned back in his chair. The girl was right. They don't die. The forest takes their sound and replaces it. I asked if it was a metaphor, a cautionary tale to scare children. He shook his head slowly. No, it's a law, like gravity. You don't have to believe in it. It still pulls you down. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. He placed it on the table and opened it slowly. Inside was a flute, carved from elderwood, polished, beautiful, but cracked down the middle, as if the wood had screamed. This is André's flute, he said. We buried it 3 times. It always comes back. I stared at it, feeling a strange vibration in my chest, not sound, but memory, as if the instrument remembered something I hadn't done yet. That night, I left the flute where it lay and returned to my room. And again, there was a pine needle on my pillow. This time, too. And as I closed the door, I swore I heard something just beyond the trees. Not a whistle, but a breath, long, drawn out, waiting for me to make the first note. They say every curse has a name, but in Valea Morti, the name was a melody, one that no one dared repeat, one that once echoed across the trees and was never forgotten. His name was André Moga, 16 years old, mischievous, fearless, magnetic in the way young boys often are before the world shows them why it's dangerous to laugh too loud.
He was born in winter and hated the cold. Maybe that's why he whistled, to summon warmth. Or maybe it was simply to challenge the silence that ruled this village like a tyrant. Whistling to him was rebellion, and rebellion in Valea Morti meant risk. His father, Nikolai Moga, was a stern man, a widower, a carpenter who worked with knots and splinters the way other men worked with prayer and patience. He believed in rules, not myths. But Andre? He believed in the opposite of silence. He believed in sound. And one day, he decided to test the rule that shaped his whole village. It was the first snowfall of December. The woods had turned white, blanketing the twisted roots in frost. The fog was thick, and the air was too still, as if even the wind were holding its breath. André disappeared into the trees with a wooden flute carved by his own hand. Some say he had etched symbols into it, mocking the protective words the village carved above their doors. Others say he left a note that read simply, "I'm going to make the forest sing." He was never seen again. But the forest replied. 3 nights after his disappearance, the villagers heard it. His melody, unmistakable, drifting through the fog, but slower, hollow, as if something inhuman were trying to remember the song from memory. A search party found his boots at the base of the whistler's tree, a gnarled, blackened pine with no leaves and bark the color of burnt skin. Between the roots lay his flute, cracked down the middle.
There was no blood, no body, no tracks in the snow. Only a single pine needle floating in the air, and a cold breeze that carried the last note he ever played. I stood before that very tree the next day. Sorina had taken me there, reluctantly. "It doesn't like visitors," she whispered, "especially those who speak its name." The tree was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was massive, taller than any other pine, and yet it bore no life. No birds nested in its branches, no moss clung to its base, and strangest of all, the snow never seemed to settle on it. I placed my hand on the bark. It was warm, not sun-warmed, not heated, alive. I stepped back. Beneath my feet were hundreds of pine needles, but when I bent down to examine one, I noticed something odd. They weren't all pine. Some were hairs, thin, black, human. Sorina wouldn't go any closer. She pointed to a ring of stones set in the earth. "This is the last place anyone heard his voice." I asked her what the villagers believed happened to him. She said only this: "We believe he was claimed." "By the forest?" "No," she said, "by something older than the forest, something that was waiting for a sound to follow." That evening, Baba Ili told me the rest. He had been a boy himself when André vanished. He remembered the silence that followed, not just grief, but fear. For years after, strange things happened. A hunter returned from the woods without his tongue. A child vanished after humming a lullaby near the well. An entire family was found asleep in their home, mouths open, but lungs collapsed, as if something had breathed them out. Eventually, the elders called for an ancient rite, a pact, one that would bind the village in silence and bind the forest to its own edge. The Silence Pact.
It's not a curse, Baba Ili told me. It's a covenant. We give the forest our silence, and in return, it keeps what it has taken. I asked him what would happen if the pact was broken. His eyes narrowed. Then it starts to listen again. And if it listens? He didn't finish the sentence. He simply reached for the old flute and handed it to me. "This is not music," he said. "This is bait." That night, I lay awake with the flute on the table beside me. Its crack had grown. The room was cold, but I was sweating. And just as I began to drift into sleep, I heard it again. Not outside, not from the trees, but from the walls. A low whistle, slow, steady. Exactly the tune I'd heard on the tape. Exactly the tune from Andre's story. But not quite right. Too long, too deep, too hungry. I looked to the flute. It was vibrating. And from the crack in the wood, a single pine needle slid out.
There is a kind of silence that is peaceful. The hush of snowfall, the stillness before dawn, the quiet between heartbeats when you're holding someone close. But this wasn't that. This was the silence of suffocation, the kind of silence that has rules. The next morning, Serena met me at my door before sunrise. She didn't knock, she simply appeared, her face pale and unreadable beneath her woolen shawl. "It happens today," she said. I didn't have to ask what she meant. The Silence Pact. Only once a year, on the final new moon before winter fully settles in, the villagers perform a rite so old no one remembers where it began, only that it must be done, that if it's not, the forest starts listening again. Serena handed me a piece of cloth, black linen roughly cut. "Cover your mouth, no one speaks, not a sound, not even a breath if you can help it." I nodded, tying the cloth over my face. It smelled faintly of pine resin and smoke. We walked in a quiet procession, 20, maybe 30 villagers, all wearing dark cloaks, faces veiled. The children were carried, no carts, no talking, no footsteps louder than snowflakes. Even the babies were silent. I still don't know how. They led me through a narrow trail into the forest, where the fog hung low and the trees seemed to lean closer with each step. After nearly an hour, we reached a clearing surrounded by standing stones, 7 monoliths, each carved with a single vertical line slashed diagonally near the top. I recognized the symbol. It meant mute in an ancient local script. At the center of the circle stood an altar made of deadwood and bone. Animal skulls hung from the trees, their jaws stitched shut with wire. A shallow bowl sat on the altar, already filled with a thick black liquid, tar perhaps, or old blood. Baba Ili stood by the altar, robed in gray, holding a wooden mask shaped like a closed mouth. When he turned to us, every villager knelt instantly. I followed. Then began the ritual. First, each person placed a token of voice into the bowl, something that once made sound. A whistle, a bell, a baby's rattle, even teeth. When it was my turn, Serena handed me a small metal wind chime, mute, rusted, covered in soot. I dropped it into the bowl. It sank without a ripple. Then Baba Ili raised his hands and began the Choreo Mutis, the dance of silence. It wasn't really a dance, more a series of slow, ritualistic gestures. Fingers pressed to lips, palms held skyward, heads bowed. Every movement was deliberate, weighted, meant to hush not just the mouth, but the soul. Then came the final part. Each villager approached the altar, knelt, and allowed their mouths to be painted shut with the black liquid, one stroke from ear to ear. When it was my turn, I hesitated, but Baba Ilya's eyes locked with mine. There was no threat, only gravity. I nodded. The brush was cold, slick, heavy. When it touched my lips, I felt something strange. Not fear, not numbness, absence. Like my voice had been unthreaded from my body and hung in the trees, watching. The ceremony ended with the lighting of 7 candles, one for each whisperer the forest had taken. The flames flickered, then vanished, not blown out, not extinguished, taken. In the sudden darkness, the air seemed to press inward. My ears rang with a high-pitched whine, like something was holding back a scream that wanted to tear the forest in two. And then, nothing. Silence. Total. Final. Holy. As we walked back to the village in the twilight, I noticed something peculiar. No birds followed us. No insects chirped. Even the snow refused to crunch beneath our boots. It was as if the world itself had joined the ritual, or been warned by it. Back in my room, I tried to speak. Nothing. My voice was there, in my chest, but it wouldn't rise. Like trying to shout in a dream. I splashed water on my face, wiped away the paint, and finally whispered into the recorder. November 13th, 4:02 p.m. Today, I witnessed something I still don't understand. It wasn't just a ritual. It was a contract, one the forest agreed to obey as long as we do. That night, I played back the recording, but instead of my voice, I heard something else. A whistle. 3 long notes. Then, faintly, at the edge of the static, you broke it. There are some things we only notice when they're gone, like your voice. I tried speaking again the next morning. Nothing. No sound, no vibration, no whisper of breath shaped into words. My throat moved, but it was like air passed through me without touching anything human. I wasn't sick, I wasn't hoarse, I was erased. The black paint had been washed off, but the pact, it remained. And something new. The villagers pretended not to notice, or perhaps they were used to it. Baba Elie avoided my gaze. Sorina kept her answer short, as if afraid that too many words might tear a hole in the barrier between us and whatever watched from the trees. So, I walked. Not to escape, but to see, because something had changed. The forest no longer felt still, it felt aware. That afternoon, I ventured just past the village boundary, only a few steps beyond the last skull-topped post. The air was heavier here, not colder, just denser, like trying to breathe through wet cloth. I took out my camera and turned it on. The screen flickered, once, twice, then stabilized. I panned across the trees, slow and steady. Nothing moved. But when I reviewed the footage, my heart skipped. There was a figure, just for a second, standing between 2 trees, Tall, thin, dressed in rags, no face, only smooth, bark-like skin. I rewound the footage. Nothing. Frame by frame. Nothing. Gone. But I saw it. Or something wanted me to think I had. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of sound, because of sensation. You know the feeling of being watched? Not seen, watched. As if your breath, your heartbeat, your every blink is being recorded by something that doesn't understand you, but is desperate to learn. That's what I felt. I closed the curtains, locked the door, sat in the corner with a flashlight and the flute, still cracked, gripped tightly in my lap. And at exactly 3:12 a.m., the air shifted. Not wind, not movement, attention. Something had noticed me back. I heard a whisper, not with my ears, but in my skull, like memory, like thought. It's not silence you broke. It's distance. Then a soft creak from the ceiling boards above me. The guest house had no second floor. I pointed the flashlight upward. Nothing. Then behind me, a whisper of breath, cold against the back of my neck. I turned. Still nothing, but the window was open again. A single pine needle rested on the sill, and carved into the glass, so shallow I hadn't noticed it before, were 3 horizontal lines. 3, like a tally or a count. I reached for my recorder and whispered hoarsely, "Something is keeping track." But when I played it back, I didn't hear myself. Instead, I heard a voice, not mine. My voice, imitated, mocked. "Something is keeping track," it said, flat, lifeless. Then laughter, childlike, but wrong. The next morning, Serena found me standing outside the guest house, barefoot in the frost. I didn't remember leaving the room. I didn't remember dreaming. She led me back inside and made me drink something thick and bitter. It burned going down, but it cleared the fog from my head. "It's starting," she said. "You've heard it. You've spoken when you weren't supposed to, and now it's listening through you." I asked what that meant. She stared into the fire, unmoving. "Once it knows your voice, it doesn't let go. It'll echo through you until you are the one it sends back." That night, I set up 5 cameras around the room, motion sensors, thermal triggers, infrared lenses. I went to bed armed with every rational defense I knew. And still, at 2:47 a.m., all 5 cameras shut off simultaneously. The last frame recorded, a figure standing just outside the window, leaning in, smiling, but its mouth wasn't a mouth. It was a hole, long, black, and inside were teeth made of wood. I had always believed that the line between reality and myth was drawn in the mind, that fear came from suggestion, not substance. But now, I no longer believed that line existed at all. I believed in the trees. I believed in the silence. And most terrifying of all, I believed something was waiting for me to believe. I left the village just before dawn. No one saw me. I wrapped my boots in cloth to muffle each step, stuffed the old flute into my coat, and carried my recorder like a relic. Not because I wanted to document anymore, but because I needed proof. Proof for the part of me that still clung to reason. The path into the forest was barely visible, just a worn depression between the roots, flanked by skull-marked totems. Behind them, the known world. Ahead of them, the uninvited. I crossed the threshold, and I didn't look back. The forest swallowed me like a lung. Everything changed at once. The light, the weight of the air, even the temperature. It was cold, but not the kind of cold that bit your skin. This was internal, hollow, a kind of emptiness that lived inside you. With every step, I felt more exposed, not to the forest, to myself, as if the silence peeled something off me, the way skin peels from sunburn. I marked the trees with chalk, tied red string behind me, placed pebbles every 100 feet. But after half an hour, I came upon a tree I knew I'd marked, and it bore no chalk. The red string was gone. The pebbles? Rearranged in the shape of a mouth. At one point, I thought I saw Serena. Just a flash of her blue shawl behind the trees. I called out, not with words, but with a soft whistle. 3 short notes, and instantly regretted it. The forest answered, not with sound, with shifting. Branches above me twisted, creaked, but with no wind. The ground trembled just enough for the dirt to breathe. I turned, ready to run back, but the path had changed. There was no path, only trees, and one of them was watching me. It didn't move, didn't blink, but I knew it wasn't a tree. It had limbs, too long, too thin. Its bark was too smooth, too flesh-like. And in the middle of its trunk, near where a heart would be, a hole shaped like a mouth. I backed away slowly, breath shaking. The recorder in my pocket clicked on by itself. "Whistle again," it said. "Let me remember you." I dropped it, and I ran. I don't know how long I moved. Hours, maybe. Time doesn't pass the same inside those woods. The light never changes. The shadows always point the same way. And no matter how far I went, the air never cleared. It clung to my lungs like mold. Eventually, I collapsed beneath a fallen tree, panting. And that's when I saw them. Markers, wooden stakes, painted red, ancient symbols carved into them, arranged in a perfect circle, like a boundary. Inside the circle, nothing grew. No grass, no fungus, no moss, just ash. And one object at the center, a mirror, tall, cracked, covered in pine needles. I approached it carefully. My reflection looked normal at first. Then it smiled. I didn't. It opened its mouth and whistled. 3 notes, high, mocking, familiar. I stepped back. The trees behind me whispered, not words, laughter, low, root deep. And just above me, the sound of a second whistle echoed, louder, stronger. This one wasn't mocking. It was calling. I turned to flee, but my own voice stopped me. "Where are you going?" it said from behind me. "We haven't even begun." I didn't turn around. I couldn't, because I knew if I looked into its face, my own face, and saw it whistling again. I might not remember which one of us was real anymore. I don't know how I found the cabin. Or maybe it found me. After hours wandering through fog and phantoms, I stumbled into a clearing I swear hadn't been there minutes before. There stood a crooked, moss-covered hut of blackened logs, its roof sagging under the weight of decades of silence. It shouldn't have survived the rot, but it had. Like something preserved it. A place kept not by time, but by memory. I pushed the door open. It didn't creak. It didn't resist. It welcomed me. Inside, the air was stale with dust and old smoke. Bundles of dried herbs hung from the rafters like forgotten warnings. Charcoal sigils covered the walls, some of them matching the carvings I'd seen on the stones in the Silence Pact. But one was different. A symbol shaped like a spiral, bisected with a vertical line. It pulsed faintly, like breath, like something alive beneath the wood. I approached the table beneath it. Laid out carefully were an empty clay bowl, a strip of black cloth, a journal bound in skin-like parchment, and a flute. Not the one I had. This one was whole. I opened the journal. The pages were brittle. The ink faded, but the words remained. Written in Old Romanian, but I could read enough. The first line, Ceremonia Ecului, the echo ritual. And below it, whistle not for joy, whistle not for song, whistle only if you seek to summon what sleeps beneath bark and bone. Once summoned, it must echo, and in that echo it becomes real. My fingers trembled as I turned the page. There were diagrams, circles drawn into the dirt, candles placed at cardinal points, symbols etched onto leaves, instructions to whistle one tone into the trees, then wait for the response. If the echo returned distorted, you were to run. If the echo returned perfectly, you were to kneel, because it meant the forest had remembered you and had accepted your voice. There was one more note. Never attempt the ritual alone. I looked around. I was alone. I should have left, burned the journal, destroyed the flute. But something in me, curiosity, pride, or the echo of Andre Moga, urged me forward. So I stepped outside. The clearing was unnaturally round, as if nature itself had been cut away. I drew the ritual circle in the dirt just like the instructions. North, south, east, west. Lit 4 candles from the pack I always carried in my field bag, and then I held the flute to my lips. I didn't play a song, just 3 notes. Soft, slow, hung in the air like moths caught in spider silk. I lowered the flute and waited. Seconds passed. Then, from the trees, 3 notes, identical, perfect, flawless. The journal had said to kneel, but I couldn't move because something else happened. The trees leaned in, not metaphorically, physically. The trunks bent, the branches lowered, as if the whole forest was drawing breath. And in that breath, I felt my own name fall out of me. Not spoken, extracted, like it no longer belonged to me. A figure stepped into the clearing. Not a spirit, not a beast, but something in between. Tall, wrapped in tattered robes made of woven bark and fur. Its head was smooth, featureless, except for the mouth. A long, gaping oval that stretched from jaw to chest. Inside, flute pipes, hollow branches, strings of pine needles tied like vocal cords. It didn't walk, it glided,
and when it stopped in front of me, it raised my flute to its mouth and whistled. My notes, flawless. But this time they echoed again from every tree. The forest became a chamber of sound. 3 notes, again and again, reverberating like a heartbeat made of wood and wind. And beneath it all, a voice, ancient, layered, impossible to place. You remembered us, so we remember you. You spoke, so now you listen. You entered, so now you become. I dropped the flute, but the sound didn't stop. Even with my ears covered, I could hear it, in my blood, in my breath. And then, silence. Total. I blinked. The figure was gone. The candles were snuffed out. The ritual circle had vanished. And behind me, the cabin had collapsed into ash. I ran. Didn't think, didn't track, didn't breathe. Branches cut my arms, roots grabbed at my feet, but nothing followed. Or maybe everything did. By the time I found the village again, it was dusk, and no one met me. Not Surina, not Baba Ilye, not even the children. Only a single sound greeted me. A whistle from my room. 3 notes. Perfect. Waiting.
When I stepped into the village again, something had changed. The houses were still where I left them. The church tower still loomed without a bell. The totems at the edge of the forest still faced outward, skulls tilted slightly in the windless dusk. But the air was different. Not colder, not heavier, stiller, as if even silence had stopped breathing. I walked through the center of town. No footsteps joined mine. No dogs barked. No fires crackled. Every window was closed, every curtain drawn. I reached the well, the same stone circle, the same wooden lid. But now, carved across its surface, were 3 symbols I hadn't seen before. 3 slashes, like the ones on my window, like the ones marked into the trees. And beneath them, a word scrawled hastily in coal. In torse. Returned. I turned toward the guest house. Its door was ajar. A single pine needle lay just inside the frame. I entered. No lights. No heat. But my backpack was on the table, my journal opened, my recorder beside it, still running. I picked it up and pressed play. Nothing. Then static. Then my voice. Returned, but not whole. The trees remember me, but the village does not. My hands trembled. I never said those words. Not aloud, not into the recorder. And then another voice layered on top of mine, not distorted, copied. Returned, returned, returned. Then laughter, soft, familiar, and something worse. A second version of my voice, whispering over the first. You never left. A knock. I spun around. Sorina stood in the doorway, her face pale, lips pressed tight. Her eyes did not meet mine. They know, she said quietly. Know what? She hesitated. That you did the ritual. I nodded slowly. Did you follow me? No, but we heard the echo. So what happens now? She stepped inside, closed the door, and sat across from me. Then, in the quietest voice I had heard from her yet, she said, Now we find out who came back. Before I could respond, she took out a thin silver chain with a pendant shaped like a spiral, just like the one from the cabin. She held it in front of me. Follow it, she said. The pendant began to sway, back and forth. Her voice was calm, rehearsed. What's your name? You know it. Say it. I opened my mouth, and nothing came out. Not silence, not hoarseness, just emptiness. The sound refused to form. The name I'd carried all my life, gone. Serena's eyes filled with fear. You didn't just complete the ritual. You surrendered to it. You let the forest answer back. She explained what no one in the village ever dared say aloud, that some who return from the woods are not the same. They look the same, sound the same, but their voices are borrowed, their names replaced, their memories edited. And if you listen closely, they hum when they think no one is near. A tune the trees taught them. 3 notes, always the same. I gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. So what am I now? She looked at me for a long time, then stood. You're still you for now, but the more you speak, the more it grows inside you. And one day, your voice won't come from your mouth anymore. It'll come from the forest. She turned to leave, but before she reached the door, I asked, Has this happened before? She paused, then nodded. Once. Who? Andre. The last whistler, the boy who vanished, the boy who returned, the boy no one saw again, but whose voice echoed in the woods, over and over, because he never truly came back, only his sound did. And now, so had mine. It started with a dream. I was standing at the edge of the woods again, the same clearing, the same cracked mirror. But this time, I wasn't holding the flute. I was the flute. My ribs hollowed, my lungs no longer for breathing, but for resonating. And when the wind passed through me, I sang, not with words, but with that 3-note call the forest had etched into the marrow of my bones. A sound I once made, a sound that now made me. When I woke, my pillow was soaked with sweat. The window was open again, and outside in the fog, I saw them. Not figures, shapes. Dozens, maybe more, standing between the trees, listening, waiting. That morning I returned to Baba Ilye. He was sitting in the church, not praying, just staring at the altar where the cross should have been. There was no cross, only a flute carved into the wood. I sat beside him and whispered, "You knew this would happen." He didn't look at me. The forest only needs one voice, but it remembers every voice it has taken. I didn't mean to summon it. You didn't summon it, he said. You joined it. He handed me a page torn from one of the old grimoires, cracked ink, burnt corners. On it was a diagram, a mouth drawn as a spiral. Beneath it, 3 lines stacked vertically, and a list of laws. The 3-whistle law. Whistle once, it hears. Whistle twice, it follows. Whistle thrice, it remembers. And when it remembers, it does not forget. Baba Ilye tapped the page. You broke the first law in the woods. The second when you called back. The third when you let it echo through you. He turned to me then, his face heavy, old. Now it's not just following your sound, it's becoming your sound. Every time you speak,
It grows. I walked back to the guest house in silence, heart pounding, sat at the desk, lit a candle, and tested it. I hummed just a low vibration, a tone. From the far end of the room, barely audible, the same hum returned. I tried again, a different pitch. The echo followed, exactly, but delayed, as if being replayed, not naturally echoed. I picked up the recorder. "If you're there," I whispered, "what are you?" The recorder clicked, paused. Then, with my own voice, it replied, "A mouth without a name, a voice without a body."
A memory looking for a throat. That night, the villagers held another gathering, this time in secret. Candles hidden under bowls, incense lit without flame. They drew a circle in ash and whispered prayers in a dialect even Sorina didn't fully understand. I stood outside, watching from the trees. They weren't trying to banish it. They were trying to contain me. Later, Sorina approached me. "It's not hatred," she said. "It's fear." "I'm infected?" "Not you, your voice." She pulled a paper from her coat, a record from the archives, a list of missing people, names written by hand, all from the last 80 years. Most had no cause of death, but all had one thing in common. Each name had 3 vertical lines drawn beside it, and at the bottom of the page, one name more recent, Andre Moga III. Beneath it, space for a new entry, blank, waiting for mine. That night, I couldn't help it. I stood at the window and whistled. Just once. A test. The forest stayed still. No movement. No reply. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Nothing. I breathed out in relief until I turned around and someone was standing behind me. Not in the room, but in the mirror. They didn't move, didn't blink. They just stood there, mouth open, face blurred, and from their throat came one sound. 3 notes. Perfect. Mine. You never think about your voice until it stops being yours. It's like air. You breathe, you speak, you hum a tune under your breath. It's instinct. But what happens when the sound that comes out of your mouth isn't coming from you anymore? It began subtly. I coughed. And half a second later, I heard the cough again. Same pitch, same rhythm, from behind me. I sneezed. Then the same sneeze from the hallway. I thought maybe it was echo or paranoia, until I said my name aloud. My name is... And before I could finish, something said it for me. From the mirror, from the walls, from inside the pipes, the wood, the air itself. My name. But hollow, emptied of soul, like someone dragging my identity across gravel. I rushed to Serena's house, banged on the door until she opened it. Before I could speak, she raised her finger. "Don't talk," she whispered. "Not here." She pulled me inside, drew the curtains, and pointed at a chair surrounded by dried herbs and lines of salt. "Sit, now." I obeyed. She lit a flame beneath a black bowl and poured oil over a bundle of thistle. Smoke curled upward in ribbons of red and violet. Then she spoke a chant. The room vibrated, and slowly the air around me began to hum, low at first, then louder. It wasn't from her. It was from me, from my chest, from inside my teeth, like I was a speaker for something else. Serena held out a mirror. She said, "Look and don't blink." I stared. At first, it was me. Then my mouth opened, but I hadn't moved. The mirror mouth smiled, softly, sadly, and whispered, "He speaks, so I don't have to." I leapt back, knocked over the chair. The hum vanished. Serena didn't flinch. She said, "It's growing. It's using your voice to feed itself." On what? On attention. Every time someone hears you speak, it learns them. It follows their memory of you. It becomes a version of you in their minds. I was trembling. "So I can't talk to anyone?" She hesitated, then said the words that shook me. "You already haven't, not for days." I opened my mouth to deny it, but she showed me a tape recorder. Pressed play. "Hi, it's me," the voice on the tape said. "I think something's wrong." It was my voice, but as I listened, I realized the intonation was just slightly off, too flat, too perfect, like someone imitating speech without emotion. "It's been speaking through you since the ritual," Serena whispered. "We haven't heard you since the forest echoed back." I ran from her home. The village blurred around me. People stared through curtains, not out of malice, but out of grief. They weren't scared of me anymore. They were mourning. In my room, I ripped every reflective surface off the walls, covered the mirror, smashed the windows, poured wax into the recorder's microphone. But still, when I tried to speak, something else spoke first. I wrote in my journal, "It's not possession, it's substitution. The forest doesn't enter you, it lets you enter it, and in return, it speaks you back into the world." That night, I sat alone. I didn't speak, didn't move, just listened. And in the silence, I heard breathing, not mine. Inhalation, exhalation, in sync with my heartbeat, but on the offbeat, like an echo that was now independent. And then, from beneath the floorboards, 3 notes, low, distant, then closer, again and again, and then, in my own voice, "You were never a voice, only an instrument." I didn't plan to return to the church, but something pulled me there. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the mirror, covered now with dark linen. Or maybe it was the nagging question I could no longer ignore. Had this happened before? Not just to Andrei, to others. Others who came seeking stories like me. Others who brought back more than they intended. Others who never truly came back at all. The church basement was locked. Baba Elia had once told me it was used for storage, nothing more. But that wasn't the truth. The lock gave way with one twist of my pocket knife. Not stubborn, just old, like no one had opened it in decades. The staircase creaked, not loudly, but unnaturally, as if the sound weren't being created, but released, freed from where it had been held for far too long. Below, the air was thick with dust. Shelves lined the walls, staked with books, scrolls, jars of ash, and dozens of old metal canisters. Audio reels, each labeled in pencil, faded by time and moisture. Some bore only numbers, others names, and one of them made my blood run cold. K. Vichner, 1953.
Karl Wichner, the Austrian folklorist who first documented the silent forest, whose writings led me here, whose final letter ended with, "Do not whistle, the trees remember sound." He was never seen again. I took the reel upstairs, borrowed the old tape machine stored behind the altar. It whirred to life with a grinding cough of static. I pressed play. First, silence, then crackling, then Wichner's voice, shaky, German-accented Romanian. Date, October 2nd, 1953. This is Karl Wichner, documenting final observations from Velja Mortsi. I believe I have made a mistake. Pause, a shuffle. Last night, I tested the forest's law. 3 notes, whistled, once, then twice. I did not reach the third. The second was enough. I dreamed of mouths growing from trees, of voices calling my name from inside the well. But the worst part was not the dreams. It was waking up and hearing my voice still talking. My stomach turned. Wichner was describing exactly what I had been living. The village does not trust me, nor should they. They say my shadow no longer matches my walk. I checked, and it's true.
It follows slightly too late. The tape crackled violently. Then, a whistle. Soft, faint, echoed by dozens of other whistles, some too deep, too slow to be human. Then his voice again, but different, flatter, less alive. I will leave this here, so that if someone finds it, they will know. Static. It doesn't take your body, it takes your sound. And when the trees learn your voice, they use it. A long pause. Then, in my own voice, recorded decades before I was born, "You've already been heard." I ripped the tape out. The machine kept playing. No reel, no tape, just the sound of my own laughter from the shadows of the room. I staggered outside. The village was empty, or so I thought, until I turned toward the well and saw 7 villagers standing around it in a circle, each one facing inward, each one humming my voice. I didn't call out because I couldn't, and because deep down I knew they weren't humming for me. They were humming to something wearing me. I returned to my room, heart pounding. On my desk sat a new reel. I hadn't put it there. Labeled, Returned, 2025. I didn't dare play it. But I didn't need to, because I already knew what it said and what voice it would use. It began the way all hauntings do, not with screams, but with familiarity. I spoke to Serena the next morning, or thought I did. She answered me normally, nodded, even smiled faintly. But then, after a pause, her face twisted, not in fear, but in recognition. "Say that again," she whispered. "What?" "That sentence, exactly. Don't change a word." I repeated it, and she stepped back, as if I'd struck her. "That wasn't your voice." "What do you mean?" "It sounded like you, but it wasn't coming from you." She led me to the mirror, took a deep breath. "Speak. Watch your reflection." So I did. Just a sentence, just a name. But in the mirror, my mouth moved differently. The timing was off. Not a delay, and independence. The mirror mouth had its own rhythm, and worse, it kept speaking after I stopped. That night, I tried to stay silent. I didn't speak, didn't hum, didn't even think in words, fearing they might echo. But still, I heard it. Not in the air, in others. I walked past a house. A child was inside, humming a lullaby. I froze. I recognized it. It was the same three-note whistle I had once played in the forest. I hadn't taught it to anyone, but the sound was spreading. Sorina called it the carrying. She said, "It's what happens when your sound becomes stronger than your will. It starts infecting memory, spreading through attention. People don't have to hear you speak anymore. They just have to remember what you sound like. And that memory lets it travel." Later that night, I heard someone knock at my door. I opened it to find no one, only a slip of parchment pinned to the wood with a bone needle. 3 symbols, and underneath a message. You are no longer the voice. You are the conduit. The next time I tried to speak to Baba Ili, he cried. Not from grief, from recognition. He fell to his knees and whispered a prayer I couldn't understand. When I tried to lift him, he backed away. Your mouth, it doesn't belong to you anymore, he said. It's not your lips moving, it's your echo animating them. And soon it won't wait for you to speak. It will speak on its own. That evening, I recorded myself reading a passage from my notebook. When I played it back, the words were wrong. Same rhythm, same tone, but different meaning. I had written, "The forest remembers sound." The recording said, "The forest is sound." Another line I had written, "I fear what I've become."
The tape said, "I await what I'll become." It wasn't just copying me, it was replacing intention, taking my shape and using it to speak its own will. I stopped speaking after that, completely, but it didn't matter, because now people were hearing my voice when I wasn't even there. Children pointed into empty corners and said, "He's singing again." An old man swore he heard me outside his window at midnight. Baba Ilie found 3 sets of footprints leading from his door to the forest, one of them barefoot, the same size as mine. I hadn't left my room. The villagers began avoiding me. They didn't blame me, they pitied me, because they knew what came next. And one night, Sorina told me plainly, "You are not possessed, you're being rehearsed. It is practicing through you, for itself." I asked her how she knew. She didn't answer, just unbuttoned the sleeve of her shirt, revealed 3 raised scars on her forearm, thin, even, almost like tally marks. "I was 9, she said, and it used my brother's voice for weeks after he vanished, until the night we heard him humming outside the well. But it wasn't him. It was the forest wearing him. And when he finally came to the door," she stopped. Her voice broke. "He looked like my brother, but when he smiled, his teeth were made of wood. I asked where he was now. She didn't answer, just closed her eyes and whistled 3 notes, and the forest whistled back." There are nights that feel like the world is holding its breath, and then there are nights when the world breathes out and something else breathes in. The villagers call it Nuaptia Rochie, the Red Night. It happens once a year, always without warning. No calendar, no astronomer, only instinct passed down through generations. And when the time comes, they prepare. On the day of the red moon, no one speaks, not even the crows. The children are kept underground. The animals are fed double, then locked away. And every home is marked with a line of ash across the doorway, 3 slashes drawn with a deer bone dipped in soot. I watched as Sorina dragged the bone across my door. "Tonight," she whispered, "we do not pray for safety. We pray to be forgotten." The forest turns red before the sky does. The leaves shimmer crimson, even if they've already fallen. The bark glows faintly, as if stained by memory. And then the moon rises, low, wide, bleeding, a perfect sphere of rust above the canopy, and the air begins to hum, not with sound, with anticipation, as if the trees remember this night better than the villagers do, as if the soil itself prepares to open its throat. At midnight, the villagers gather at the well. They wear no masks, they carry no weapons, only candles and a single spool of thread. Each person takes a turn sewing their lips shut, not physically, but symbolically. 1 stitch per person pressed against the mouth, then tied off at the back of the neck. I was given thread too. Sorina met my eyes. "Tonight," she whispered, "if it speaks through you and you respond, it becomes real," I finished. She nodded. "This is the last seal." They drew a large circle around the well, 7 candles placed at cardinal points, bones laid in perfect lines between them, and in the center, a bowl carved from petrified wood. Baba Ilye stood behind it, his mouth painted black, his hands shaking. "He give back the voices borrowed," he whispered. "We stitch the mouth of the echo. We break the memory of its shape." Then, complete silence. No wind, no breath, only flame. And then, the sound came. A whistle, 3 notes, from the depths of the well. Then again, and again, louder, more voices, whistles layered over whispers, whispers over moans, moans turning into names. Andrei, Carl, Sorina, mine, and then mine again, but longer, slower, drawn out, as if something was wearing my name like a mask too tight. My lips began to tingle. I held them shut, tighter, but I could feel it rising, not in my throat, in my chest, a pressure, a wind, trying to push out, to use my mouth to finish the song. The villagers began chanting, not words, but breath, short bursts of air through their noses, patterns of resistance. I tried to copy them, but when I did, my voice escaped and said a single word: "Open." The candles blew out, all at once. The forest groaned, the moon pulsed, and from the edge of the clearing a figure emerged, not walking, swaying. Its arms were branches, its robe was bark, its face was smooth until it opened. A vertical slit from forehead to chest. Inside flutes, hollow wood, empty throats, and from it a sound, my voice, sung backwards, mocked. Baba Ilya raised the thread to his mouth and bit down hard. Blood spilled onto the bowl, and the figure screamed. Not loud, not angry, just wrong. Like a violin string being pulled across bone. And it turned to me,
eyes still shut, but mouth wide open. And from it, I heard my own voice say the third note, complete the echo, let me live. I almost did. I almost sang it. The note lived in my chest, burned in my lungs, promised peace if I just let it out. But I looked around, saw the villagers shaking, holding hands, mouths bleeding, still resisting, still silent. So I pressed my hand to my lips and swallowed the note. The figure shuddered, cracked, splintered, and with a final sigh, it fell backward into the well. No splash, just a sudden absence, like sound being vacuumed from the world. The villagers collapsed, one by one, not dead, just exhausted. Sorina found me, tore the thread from her face, pulled me into her arms. You didn't sing. You didn't echo. You stayed. And then the sun rose, and the red moon faded, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't hear anything at all. Not the trees, not the echo, not the forest. Only myself. And it was quiet. For now.
I thought it was over. I thought swallowing the third note had ended it. But silence can be deceptive. Sometimes silence isn't peace. It's preparation. 2 days after the red moon, the village was different. Not relieved, not saved. Just paused. Like a breath held at the bottom of the lungs. The villagers avoided the well now, not out of fear, but out of respect. They didn't speak of that night. They didn't ask what I had heard. And I didn't tell them, because I wasn't sure if I had survived that night, or if something else had. I returned to the forest. Not deep, just the edge. I needed answers, and more than that, I needed proof. I had left audio equipment hidden in the trees weeks before. A camouflaged field recorder, solar-powered. It should have captured everything. Birdsong, footsteps, whispers, or, if the stories were true, the voices of the trees. I found it half buried beneath a carpet of pine needles. The casing was cracked, the lens fogged. The tiny red light still blinked. It had been recording the entire time. I didn't wait. I took it straight back to my room, locked the door, and hit play. At first, just silence. Then wind, footsteps, birds, insects. Then whistling. Not mine, not human. Too slow, too hollow. Almost like it was being pushed through wood. Then came mimicry. A voice. Mine. Field Journal. Day 3. I'm entering the forest again. I don't believe what they believe. A pause. But I want to. That was my voice, my sentence. But the timing was wrong. There was no breath between thoughts, just pure artificial playback, like the words were strung together from memory, like something had been listening and now it was repeating.
Then came something worse. A new clip. He's listening. Let's see if he answers. Not my voice. Not anyone's I recognized. It was high, scratchy, like bark splitting. And then came the whistles.
Not three, many, layered, dozens, hundreds, all from different directions. The forest was whistling to itself. I fast-forwarded through hours of audio. The pattern repeated, silence, then whistles, then the same voice, every time. Let's teach the trees. And they learned. The pitch is improved, the rhythm tightened, the voice stopped being needed, until finally only the whistles remained. Perfect, predictable, alive. And then, on the final file, a whisper, so close it made my skin crawl. We don't echo anymore. We initiate. I dropped the recorder. Its speaker let out one last chirp. 3 notes, not from the recording, live, from outside. I ran to the window, and that's when I saw it. The trees were moving, not shaking, not swaying, tilting, in sync, like a choir made of wood. And from their trunks came sound, real sound, human sound. Voices, mine, Serena's, Andre's, all at once, singing the same 3-note whistle, again and again, calling something. I backed away, but my radio, still unplugged, crackled to life. It whispered one word. Now. I used to think the forest wanted to scare me. I was wrong. It wanted to become me. And now it was finished learning how. The trees no longer stood still. They breathed, in and out, with rhythm, with sound, with intent. Branches didn't sway, they reached. Trunks didn't groan, they spoke. Not in words, in echoes. And through those echoes, a shape was forming. I fled to the village center, but the villagers were already there, huddled around the well in a silent ring, their eyes locked on the tree line. No one screamed, no one ran, because somehow they knew. This wasn't something you escaped. It was something you either withstood or joined. The whistling returned, no longer fragmented or distant. It came from one direction now, one voice, rising above the rest, as steady as a heartbeat, as focused as a name spoken in the dark. And then it stepped into the clearing, the spirit. Not a man, not a creature, but a gathered form, a being assembled from the memory of sound. Its skin was bark, but smooth, like clay molded by wind. Its limbs were jointed like branches, swaying in sync with a rhythm only it heard. Its face was blank, except for the mouth, a wide vertical slit stretching from chin to collarbone, filled with whistling reeds instead of teeth. And from that mouth, it sang. Not just whistles, voices. Mine, yours, theirs, all layered, all twisted, a chorus of borrowed breath. Serena stood beside me, frozen. That's not a spirit, she whispered. It's a reflection. Of what? Of everyone it's ever heard. The spirit raised its head, and the forest behind it stilled. The whistle stopped. So did the wind. Even the moon seemed to hold its light. Then it opened its arms, inviting, welcoming, and from its mouth came one word, not shouted, not screamed, offered, return. I stepped forward. Something pulled at my spine,
My bones felt light, hollowed. My voice rose in my throat unbidden, and from my own lips I whispered back, "I hear you." Not because I wanted to, but because it was easier than silence. Serena grabbed my hand. Her grip was trembling but firm. "Don't repeat. Don't mirror. Don't echo," she hissed. "That's what it needs, for you to reflect it, because reflection is recognition, and recognition makes it real." But it was too late. I'd already answered once, and the spirit smiled. Its mouth curled in a way no slit should. And then it moved, not walked, not ran, but glided, right toward me. The trees leaned as it passed, and the earth hummed like a tuning fork, like a mouth preparing to speak forever. I backed away, but the sound didn't follow me. It led me. Every step I took, it stepped closer.
Not in distance, in resonance. It wasn't trying to reach my body. It was already inside my voice. And then it raised its hand, touched 2 fingers to the air between us, and with a breath that felt like winter, it exhaled through me. I didn't breathe in, but I still felt filled, and my body whistled, not with lips, but with ribs, the notes vibrating from my bones, as if I had become a reed, an instrument, a channel. The villagers began to pray, but not aloud. They moved their mouths in silent resistance, but it wasn't enough, because one by one, they began to hum my voice, and then its voice, as if the spirit was hopping between throats like notes on a flute. Serena screamed, a sound so sharp it shattered the rhythm. The spirit recoiled, just slightly, enough for me to move, to reach into my coat and pull out the flute, Andre's flute, still cracked, still cursed, but maybe still useful. I raised it. The spirit froze. Its mouth widened like it recognized the shape, and from the forest, 100 trees whistled in unison, calling, warning, pleading, "Don't, don't, don't." But I played it. 3 notes, the same ones that started it all. The spirit opened its mouth wider than should be possible. It screamed, but not a roar, a reversal, like it was unplaying every sound it had ever stolen, like it was spitting out the echoes. I fell to my knees, the ground shook, the trees snapped backward, and from within the spirit's mouth I saw faces, hundreds, screaming without sound, then vanishing like mist. One final note, one final breath. The flute snapped in half. The spirit collapsed, not into ash, but into echoes. They rose into the sky and vanished with the wind. Then, silence. Real silence. The kind that isn't waiting. The kind that doesn't listen. The kind that means, for now, it's done. For the first time in weeks, the forest was quiet. No whistles, no echoes, no breath that didn't belong to me. I sat beside the broken flute, its 2 halves still warm, as if they'd burned from within. The villagers slowly emerged from their homes. Some limped, some wept. Others just stood beneath the trees, heads bowed, listening for the silence. And it stayed for a while. Baba Ili pressed his palm to the earth and whispered something I didn't understand. Sorina placed the flute shards in a cloth, tied them shut, and buried them at the base of the old tree, the whistler's tree. No prayers, no symbols, only soil. And when it was done, she looked at me and said, "You gave it back." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe it was over. But deep inside my chest, there was a ringing. Soft, steady, familiar. That night, I tried to sleep.
But sleep didn't come, not because of fear, because of memory. My body remembered the way the spirit breathed through me, the way the air vibrated in my bones, the way my voice had been used. And now, even in stillness, I could feel something moving, not outside, inside. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. Same face, same eyes. But when I opened my mouth to speak, nothing came out. Not because I was mute, because something else spoke first. Not in sound, in intention. I wanted to speak, but the words formed without me. I tried again. My name is... But the phrase stopped halfway, and from my lips came 3 soft notes. Unbidden, automatic, as natural as breathing. I backed away, covered my mouth, but the ringing in my chest grew louder, rhythmic like a metronome with no off switch. I opened my journal, wrote down everything I could remember. The spirit's form, the forest's mimicry, the whispers in the tape, the night the trees sang. But when I closed the book, the ink was gone. All pages were blank, except the last one,
where 3 words were scratched in. You are echo. I began testing myself, recording, speaking, repeating. Sometimes my voice played back correctly. Sometimes it played something else. Phrases I never said. Lullabies in languages I didn't know. And worst of all, my name, sung slowly, like a prayer or a summoning. I rushed to Serena. She opened the door and saw my face, and in that instant, she understood. "You brought it back, didn't you?" she said. "I tried to destroy it." "You did," she nodded. "But it wasn't in the flute. It was in the act. It needed someone to complete the 3rd note willingly, and you finished it." We sat by candlelight. She wrapped a red cord around my wrist. "This will not save you," she said, "but it may delay what's coming." "And what is that?" "The moment you no longer know if the voice in your mouth is yours." At sunrise, I stood at the edge of the forest once more. It was quiet, utterly still. But now I understood the danger. Not when the forest speaks back, but when it no longer needs to. Because now it had found something better than imitation. It had found me. And deep inside, I felt it, a breath rising, a note forming, not from the throat, but from the soul. And this time, the voice would not ask for permission. It would simply speak. The next morning, I was gone. Not missing in the way travelers vanish in the wilderness, not in the way stories say someone left without a trace. I was missing in a deeper way, as if I had never existed at all. Serena was the first to notice. My room was untouched, the bed still warm, the red cord still tied to the bedpost. But I wasn't there, and neither was my voice recorder. Only my journal remained, pages now filled with looping lines of 3 notes written over and over like a mantra. No signature, no handwriting to match, just that same whisper of repetition. The villagers searched. They scoured the forest edges, dug near the well, chopped through the brush. Nothing. No blood, no tracks, no footprints in the frost. Just silence. But that night, something came back. Not me, the recorder, placed on the doorstep of the church, wrapped in pine branches.
still running, still recording. They gathered in the chapel, candles lit, curtains drawn, and they pressed play. First, static, then breathing, long, calm, almost peaceful. Then, a whistle. 3 notes, spaced out, deliberate. And again, like a metronome, like a heartbeat. Then, a voice. My voice. Flat, even, almost mechanical. Journal, final entry. I am still here, just not in the way you remember. The trees no longer echo me. They emit me, reproduce me. I have become broadcast. The villager sat motionless. No one dared speak, but the tape went on. If you hear my voice, do not answer. Do not repeat it. Do not think it sounds familiar, because it will sound familiar. That's how it finds you. That's how it spreads. Through memory, through mimicry, through the mouth that calls itself yours. The tape hissed, the sound of footsteps, not walking,
crunching through leaves, getting closer, and then a child's voice, not mine. Is he the forest now? A pause, then my voice again, but slower, detached. No, the forest is him now. Then, for 6 minutes straight, only whistling. 3 notes, on loop, perfectly spaced, perfectly pitched, unnatural in its consistency. And as the recording played, the villagers began to hear another sound, not from the speaker, from outside. They opened the door and saw them, figures in the tree line, not moving, not breathing, but echoing. Mouths open, eyes shut, each one shaped like someone who had vanished from the village over the years, and all of them whistling. 3 notes, in sync. Sorina stepped back into the chapel, her face pale, her hands shaking. She turned off the recorder, wrapped it in cloth, buried it under stone, then carved into the church door 3 slashes, and beneath it, remembered but never found. They never spoke of me again, not in words, not in sound, because they understood I hadn't been taken, I had been kept by the trees, by the echo, by the thing that no longer needed to mimic, because now I was the mimicry. And somewhere deep in that forest, if you stand still enough, if you let the wind settle, you will hear it. Not a voice, not a scream, just a whistle. 3 notes, over and over, forever.
The village never spoke of him again, but the world did. Not in headlines, not in books, not in truth, in rumors, in late-night threads, campfire stories, distorted videos that vanish before they load. They never used his name. They only called him the Echo Man.
It started small. A group of hikers in the Tatra Mountains reported hearing a whistling that matched no bird, no wind, no human. Perfect rhythm. 3 tones. One of them mimicked it. He never made it out of the forest. The others, they swore his voice followed them home. Weeks later, a wildlife photographer in the Black Forest captured audio while recording owl calls. At 3:12 a.m., his equipment picked up a human whistle, repeating. Then a soft voice, "Return." He deleted the files, but days later, he began to speak in his own voice, even when his mouth was closed. From Mongolia to Manitoba, reports surfaced. Children humming melodies they couldn't explain. Radios turning on at night and whistling. People waking with dirt in their lungs and pine needles on their pillow. Most were dismissed, written off as internet hoaxes or sleep paralysis hallucinations. But one fact kept appearing, one constant: 3 notes. An audio researcher at a Scandinavian university found an old Romanian field recording from 1953, filed under Unexplained Anomalies. The tape featured a man's voice describing a ritual in the Carpathians. The last sentence on the tape, "It speaks me now." She played the recording on a live stream. Thousands heard it. Within a week, several viewers began reporting the same dream: a forest, a figure made of bark and breath, a mirror without reflection, and the irresistible urge to whistle. One user uploaded a synthesized version of the 3 notes, just for fun, he claimed. It was shared, downloaded, remixed. Someone even added it to a lo-fi sleep track. Millions streamed it, and somewhere, something listened back. The internet called it a meme, then a curse, then forgot about it. But in the woods, new ones, foreign ones, rangers began reporting strange symbols carved into trees, and beneath them, in faint chalk or blood or ash, remembered. A documentary filmmaker visited Valea Morti years later. She found the village empty. No residents, no buildings intact, just the well and a recorder, old but still blinking. She pressed play. It didn't hiss, it didn't crackle. It simply sang. 3 notes, then a voice. "You don't have to find the forest. If you've heard me, it's already found you." The camera cut off. That was the last footage she ever uploaded. But on the day her channel disappeared, thousands reported the same thing. Their phones began whistling. Just once. No app, no source, just the sound. 3 notes. They say if you mimic the sound, nothing happens. Not right away. But weeks later, your dog avoids you. Your reflection lags in the mirror. And sometimes you find your own voice on a voicemail you never left. The spirit never needed a forest. It needed a carrier. It needed resonance. Now it has connection. It doesn't wait for you to find it. It lives in every echo, every mimic, every mouth that opens just to repeat. So if you're reading this, and you ever hear 3 notes in perfect rhythm, don't whistle back. Don't record it. And whatever you do, don't remember it. Because once it knows you remember, it will start remembering you. Years passed, seasons changed, maps were redrawn, but the forest remained quiet, patient, and always listening.
The name Valea Morti was erased from official records. Satellite images showed nothing but wilderness. Government surveys claimed the land had been reclaimed by nature, but locals knew better. They never went near it. Children were warned with bedtime stories. Hunters avoided its perimeter. Even the animals seemed to circle it rather than pass through. They called it the Hollow Wood, and those who dared approach it, they all came back, but never the same. In a remote corner of a university archive, a professor of folklore discovered a handwritten note tucked inside an old anthropology thesis. It contained just one sentence. Silence was never a superstition. It was a seal. And beneath it, 3 lines carved in ink. He brought it home, photographed it, posted it online. The next day, he was found on his office floor, alive but mute and humming. Rumors began to circulate of a new sound emerging in the quiet places of the world. Not quite a whistle, not quite a song, but familiar. Always 3 notes, always flawless. In a podcast on urban myths, a guest once joked, "You know how horror movies always say don't do it, but the characters always do it anyway? Well, this one's different, because the rule isn't about fear, it's about containment." A new traveler, anonymous, curious, skeptical, documented their trip to the edge of the Hollow Wood. They brought no recorders, no cameras, just a notebook and a pen. In their final written entry, they described feeling watched, hearing a faint melody, and a whisper in a language they didn't know. But the last sentence is what stood out, written shakily, as if their hand wasn't entirely their own.
I didn't whistle. I swear I didn't, but something inside me did. The pages ended there, but the notebook was later found placed at the base of a pine tree, the ink fresh, and beneath it, carved into the bark, "Do not whistle. Do not echo. Do not respond. This is not a forest. It's a choir waiting to remember." And still, somewhere in the world, people whistle, out of habit, out of joy, out of boredom. And in that moment, just for a breath, the air feels too still, the wind too quiet, and the trees, they tilt, just slightly, as if listening, as if waiting. And then 3 notes returned. It always ends the same way. A breath held, a heart quickened, and a choice. Stay silent or join the song. Because the rule has always been simple. It was carved into stone long before stories were told. And now it's carved into us. Silence is not fear. Silence is not weakness. Silence is a warning. And if you ever forget that, the forest will remind you with 3 soft notes and a voice that sounds like yours, but isn't.